That's pretty interesting. So what's the first knife sharpener?
Typically, it's going to be like a carbide pull through or like a.
Crazy.
Is yours?
Not mine.
Must
You're
be
the
mine.
berry guy, but I don't know.
Do you see many of just like stones, like a Smith's stone? Like, is that
I think that's part of what
That's
it
basically
could
the
be.
conversation I want to have with you guys.
Yeah.
basically
Yeah,
it.
let's roll into it. What's up, guys? We just got done sitting down with Lucas Burnley here, just catching up and learning a little bit more about sharpening, the in-depth of how he would approach it, some of the misconceptions that different people have, and how we each approach sharpening in a different way. Check out the video, keep watching. I think you guys will enjoy it. Yeah, and I think that's, like, personally, that's one of my favorite ways to sharpen.
Yeah.
Like, I'll have a ceramic rod, this one, in the kitchen, and if you actually, like, measured what I sharpen on the most, it's definitely that. Just because I'm using a kitchen knife the most, I'm frequently sharpening there. Yeah, but I think it can vary, and people start at any different level from, like, oh, nope, a stone is the way to do it, and then they realize, okay, well, a guide on the stone would be nice, or they see a demo, or somebody of theirs has it, and
Well, it's application specific too, like what you're sharpening, how you're sharpening, the steel you're sharpening, like all plays. I'm like basically with like you, I've got a ceramic rod, and I just grab it and like do like super quick maintenance.
How do you do it?
I guess I don't do this. I think I do this.
Yeah.
Which is like, and I'm probably not maintaining like a super consistent edge. I guess if it's really dull, I'll probably do one side for a while. Yeah, that's the thing. Like, I feel like a heathen because
It was designed a certain way.
It was designed a certain way. Yeah, and I'm like, yeah. So like, if you guys are using this, are you doing multiple strokes on one side?
I usually alternate, but I'm with you. If it is dull and I know I need work, I'll do like 3 or 4.
3 or
and
4
then
on
the
one
other
side.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's just like a. Yeah, I think this is probably like how I saw my dad with like even like a steel or something.
I think that's true for like most people. Whenever they pick up either the steel or the ceramic, like they've just seen like wherever, a TV, whatever.
Right.
They're just either going away or coming toward them, and don't really know exactly what angle they're holding at. But that's just the common knowledge. That's honestly, I've started using it that way because I found myself so much more consistent.
So I guess with this, like you get more pressure.
I guess you could.
Right.
Yeah, the way that. Yeah, I mean, I guess the way we tell people to use it is to rest it, and then like, so you draw all the way down.
Yeah, makes sense.
And that way you're keeping that angle. Yeah, but you're right. I've seen people just like who do either this way or this way.
Yeah.
But like, if you think about, I'm not saying there's not pros out there who nail that angle every time, but like you think about how fast you're going from 17 to 20 degrees, flip it 17 to 20 degree, like that's a lot to like.
Right.
Yeah.
So
I don't use the angle guide either. But I will maybe I use it once and I get that, and then I just come and I usually do this. Same side of the stone, which honestly has the same amount of angle changing.
Right.
Of like.
This is like the functional versus theoretical, right? And this is like something that I struggle with a lot, which is what like functional sharp for a knife is fully maintainable, hand controlled.
Yep.
Right.
Yep. You can find when you hit the edge. You can find when you're not even close.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. Or you can like, I guess I don't ever marker blades, but like you could marker a blade and like pick your angle. And I do feel like muscle memory at a point, like I think you could get pretty accurate.
Oh, totally.
You could.
Like after a while.
That's what I think I say with any system, whether you're sharpening or maintaining, like find the one that gets you comfortable, that you can develop that muscle memory with, spend some time with it. And so like Josh has built that muscle memory coming back and toward him. I'm going straight down.
But you could take it to any rod. You wouldn't need the angle guide.
Right.
No.
Yeah.
And sometimes you want to change that angle depending on the knife, obviously. Like
Right. But if you were going to change the angle, well, I mean, it actually change. I guess you're not talking changing the angle.
not the angle of the knife. The
but
knife's
a given
angle would be different.
given knife.
Yes.
Right.
Yeah. You sharpen a Wusthof or you sharpen a Shun.
Right.
You're gonna be changing.
Big difference. Being like Wusthof thicker, a little bit thicker edge,
Yeah.
steeper or less
20,
steep angle,
20,
right?
20 plus. Shun's 15.
Right.
Much finer angle.
Yeah. So, I mean, when I kind of reached out to you guys, that was part of the question was I realized like how I sharpen my knives around the house for myself versus how I sharpen a knife that I just made and I'm sending to a customer. And then the conversation with the customer when they want to go back and sharpen a knife is kind of like, and also realizing like our customer bases are so kind of diverse. So we have everything from, someone who's buying a production knife, like a CRKT, Boker, to like a semi-custom or like a high-end custom. So it's like at that point, where am I sending someone for a sharpener for maintenance? So I figured I'd come and hang out with you guys.
Right?
We've got some answers.
Hopefully we've got a few answers. But
Right.
yeah, we fielded a lot of questions, but I think what was interesting is that you're going to see a different sect of that customer base. You know, in some way, we all talk to knife guys.
Right.
We sell to knife guys. We are knife guys. We work with knife guys and gals, but then there's just a different feel.
Right.
Is it a custom knife that you're trying to sharpen?
Right.
Is it the beater that you're just like, it gets you through your job? It's the critical tool, and you're not so concerned about some aspects of it, but that thing better be sharp.
Yeah, less focus on the tool itself, more focus on the process
the job.
or the job.
Yep.
Yeah. So where do we start? Then do we start at like the really tool-based version, or do we go to like a very high level of like OCD on a custom?
Yeah.
Where do we go?
Let's start at the tool base.
Yeah.
Okay.
And that's kind of where we cut our teeth. Get in, get sharp, get back to work. It's fast, easy to use, works every time. We've run with that. It's kind of a little mantra that we use a little bit externally, but heavily internally. That's how we make products. They have to do that.
Right.
But then we've also over the years developed tools that are excellent sharpeners for high-end knives.
Right.
And
More precision.
Yep. And can be everywhere in between, to where a lot of our tools can be used in that way.
Right.
This is one of those. It's a power tool that some people are really comfortable on. I'd be comfortable if somebody handed me a really nice knife and I was going to sharpen it on that.
Right.
But I'm not going to give that to somebody who's never sharpened a knife before and tell them you should sharpen your, X thousand of dollar knife on that.
Yeah. I'm super curious in this though, and I think that like in the custom knife world, there's this stigma about powered sharpeners,
there is.
right? That comes specifically from like you walk into some knife shop and you're like, oh, I'm going to get my knife sharpened. And you hand it to the guy behind the counter and you get back like 2/3 of your blade.
Yes.
So there's a stigma.
Yeah.
And yet every knife that leaves my shop, I'm sharpening on a 2x72 belt grinder, a giant.
Yep.
And so I know it's fully capable. So I'm really interested to see like, where that comes into play in a maintenance mode on like a custom.
Yeah. Let's we'll break out the kind of the original.
Okay.
This is a Mark II version of the original, but that's what we're dealing with. It's a belt sharpener, uses a 1/2 inch by 12 inch belt.
Okay.
And then an angle guide that holds the knife vertically, almost vertically, either at 20 or 25 degrees in relation to the belt.
So
Right. Okay.
And so essentially it's taking a lot of the guesswork out of how do I hold my knife at the right angle, and it's quick.
Right.
I guess
So
I
you're
said that earlier.
pulling through.
Yep.
Yep. Okay.
So there's you've got an edge guide here. This is actually a great knife to sharpen on it. There's no bolster that's way up in front of the blade. There's no choil here. So really easy knife to drop into the guide there. Now we're gonna go
For general maintenance, like what grit are you usually at?
This is a 6,000 grit.
Super fine.
Super
Okay.
fine. Like you can. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
Like
so you're not like throwing it a
can
220 in there.
run it
And have a 220 that does a good
Right.
job of.
That actually explains like a huge piece of the puzzle for me.
If you've got a knife that's super dull, then
Right.
start back on that 220. But it's like 2 passes, and you've got a burr. You've got the burr on the other
Right.
side. You have a symmetrical, slightly convex edge.
Right.
And you're sharp and ready to go. And then this is going to last you for months and months in between. 6 months or a year in between, depending on the use of your knife. And you're just going to come back to this and give it 8 or 10 on each side.
It's honestly like using the ceramic honing rod, only you're using a belt, and it's that much faster.
It's finer
you're not
than
gonna
the
hurt.
ceramic
You're not
belt.
gonna hurt your knife. It's just a quick way to touch it up. It's something I think is overlooked a lot when it comes to our powered sharpeners. Is just
I
being able to go
completely
right
missed
next to
it.
this.
Like,
Yeah.
I mean, I sharpen a lot of times depending on the knife on a 220 grit belt, and then I'll go to a leather wheel essentially. So when I saw this,
just removing
I
the
was
burr.
like, oh, like, well, clearly I'm going to go to like a 220 or like 320 belt. This makes so much sense as far as like material refinement versus material removal.
Yep.
Totally different process. Okay. Got
This
it.
is for someone who's like, get in, get sharp, get back to work.
Right.
It's about the job to be done. It's not so much about the knife. Although it does a great job of sharpening. We were just reviewing some of these like almost lab tests that we've done, and this does like an excellent job. It's fast and puts a really sharp edge on it.
That's the beauty of the convex edge, right? Like,
Yep.
I think of a lot of the knives that I make, they have like what I consider like a factory edge, which is a fairly, straight bevel, maybe 15 to 17 degrees or somewhere in there. It's like, it's easily maintainable on a flat stone. But like, if you look at a convex edge, you're getting like that apple seed shape. It's stronger and it's reducing into a finer edge, right?
Yep. Yeah, it gets rid of a little bit of that shoulder. You know, so it like thins
secondary.
that down a little bit. Yeah, the transition from the secondary to the primary. And just for anyone who wasn't familiar, you get the knife situated, rest on the guide, get that blade all the way to the back, then power on, pull through, and then to preserve the profile, make sure you stop with that tip on the belt.
Right.
Because like on your 2x72, it's backed. So it's not you're not pushing in, it's not wrapping around.
Yeah.
But this wraps around as you come off, you see that's gonna pull over the tip. So in order to preserve, what's there.
So that makes a lot of sense, right? So you're not moving past the belt.
Yep.
You're stopping about
that
halfway.
You're stopping about halfway. Same thing we do on our belt grinders, essentially. We say, I don't know if it'll make sense in this content, but don't stop where you want to end. So like a lot of times they'll go off the edge of the grinder because they think like, oh, this is the tip, so I go off there.
Yeah.
So you're stopping wherever I want my tip to end. I'm actually stopping before that point.
Yeah.
I guess. So same exact concept.
Exactly. Yep. Yeah, otherwise I imagine you lose control at the very end because you don't have much left to work with either from the belt or the blade.
So in this, you're just right up against
all you're
that
worried
stop.
about is just on this side here, just being leaned over.
That'll
get you your angle.
And then do you go all the way down till you hit?
Yeah, that plastic is a good. Yep, it's even more helpful as you're like most of the way out of the guide. So when you're out here, if you're just like floating in space, that's challenging. But you can keep that angle by.
That's where you're gonna get your little micro bevels, which is like
You don't necessarily
nobody
have to use the front edge guide. In fact, our older models didn't even have one. You just kind of hold it there, but that's kind of the feedback we got is when you get out to the tip, you're like, I'm kind of just hanging out here in space. So having this guide here to kind of help hold you on as you pull through.
And it's just an extra, as a rest, a support.
exactly.
It makes perfect sense. So if we're talking like more tool based, but if someone wanted to not scratch up like the sides of their blade or something, they tape the blade.
You could tape the blade. This one has leather guides. Leather lined angle guides. So
I'm like nervous to do this. I don't want to try it. Okay. So.
wait.
What?
Yeah. There's a 2-speed.
Oh, okay. So I want to go slow?
1 speed.
Okay.
Yeah, there you go. This is good. I'll stop you then. One thing, place the knife into the guide and then power on.
Oh, makes sense, because then I'm not grinding in right. So you're starting. Can I run 2 on one side?
Yeah.
Yeah, especially with that micro mesh, you're not going to take too much off.
Oh, man. Yeah, a little bit of a feel to it, but...
Perfect.
That's crazy, because this is a super fine point. So if I can maintain that, it's not... Okay.
And that's
that answers a huge question.
One thing that I think also gets missed sometimes is the belt can wrap and kind of take the tip off, but if you stop halfway, it'll actually keep that.
You can put it back.
You can put it back.
It'll maintain it and keep it.
Makes perfect sense. Yeah, just like we would do on a 2x72. It's just, I guess, it's just that control, the fear of the controllability is where I was stuck on this, but seeing it now, Yeah, that's like...
And it's one of those things, too, I tell people when they first get this, if they are nervous about it, like
Right.
go down to Goodwill or your thrift store, buy some $2 knives.
Yeah.
And get used to using it. And so once you're comfortable, just like any powered machine, like it takes a little getting used to, but once you're there, it's like, oh, I'm confident now I can sharpen almost anything on this thing.
We were talking about that a little bit earlier. I feel like around sharpening, there's some hesitation just in general, but like most of us learned with like some kind of Arkansas stone, you learn slow. The risk is low.
Yep.
Like you're not going to grind away your blade, but the principles are all the same.
Yep.
You know?
Yeah, it's material removal to expose a consistent edge. You're removing any of the any dents, flat spots, any chips in the blade, and then when you get that, and usually indicated by a burr,
right?
Then make sure it's even on both sides and begin to refine until you're left with a super sharp edge after the end of the day.
So if you're sharpening with this, like, do you see a feather edge eventually? Like, will you get to where there's a little burr?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah.
And then
Not
you
so
using
much with this belt, but when you do sharpen, this is, I would almost just consider this like honing.
Okay. At this grit?
At this grit.
Yeah, at this grit.
Yeah. But if you are sharpening, which is, if the knife is in decent shape, it's literally 1 or 2 passes per side, and you do 2 on one side and you'll have a burr. You switch to the other side, same thing, 2 passes. And then you 10 with this one, and that refines that, gets rid of that feather edge of that burr.
Right. So you're doing all of it on there.
Yeah, the next belt up, it'll pop a burr in like two passes.
Yeah.
And you'll have a burr pop on
it's just a 220. That's a brand new one. So
when you guys throw on a new belt, do you break it in at all?
Depends.
Yeah.
Like if it's me, yes.
Yeah, so you like
At
run
home.
like a bar of steel or something through there.
Yep. Yeah, or just an old beater knife I got.
Yeah. Well, that's what I kind of thought was like, I carry those 2 folders probably the most.
Sure.
And it's like, okay, so if I'm going to go, to a frame lock with a thumb stud and like a close gap between like the frame and the choil, like this maybe for me now isn't the best solution, right?
Yep. It makes me, I would be nervous about that just because, or at least you need to be very aware.
Right.
Same knife here, but yep, you get like you can get a thumb
you get
stud
real
getting
close
in contact there, and you can widen the angle, which will help. But even then, like getting way back in there to get all that edge sharpened,
right?
It'll get sharp. It'll put you right back to work.
Right. Margin of error is high.
Yep, that's exactly where we're getting to, where a little bit out of the tool space,
right,
and into okay, I care a little bit more about this, and I need to make sure that like you don't come back from nicking a thumb stud on a nice knife.
Right. So where do we go? Do we go fully manual now?
Yeah, there's a couple. I think we go fully manual. Okay. So there's a few like kind of freehand. We're talking about stones. So here's just like just diamond stones.
Right.
And really, when I say diamond stones, it's like diamond plate where they're the diamond is actually like embedded into this layer of nickel.
Right.
And so it's a cool technology. Probably I'll kind of get into it, but so there's an adhesive that sticks the diamond on, and then there's this like nickel treatment.
Right.
You're
it's like NP3 or something like that.
See, we're already getting out of my wheelhouse, but what I know is that that nickel comes and settles around these the nub of diamond, and like, and actually is almost like welded it in, like surrounded it and like caps it in, because you can't glue diamond.
Right. So it's like an industrial diamond powder onto like a steel base plate.
Yep. And then
with nickel
plated to then encapsulate the.
Yep.
And the nickel plating holds it in place, but is it like as you sharpen, it's probably like worn away. Right.
Well, when you're sharpening, you're going on. I mean, if you look at like my knuckles, you're going across the top of the diamonds.
Right.
And so you're actually not getting the nickel. Use a lot of force, and you could pop those diamonds out. So you don't need to use a lot of force when you're sharpening on diamond. You actually shouldn't use a lot of force when you're sharpening on diamond, because our diamond is really good. We've worked with some of the best in the world, if not the best in the world for plating, specifically for consistency, which is where it matters for sharpening.
Right.
Yeah, and you just don't need the force. The diamond is harder than the steel. I don't care what steel you have. The diamond is harder than your steel.
Well, and that, especially now, like with all of the new steel compositions coming out, like there's always something. And I feel like for a while, people were losing their mind because they were trying to like, oh, how do we sharpen S30V?
Yeah.
And like, all I've got is this like ceramic stone.
Every time a new steel comes out, I get hit up in the comments about like, can your diamond handle this? Yes.
Yeah, diamond can handle everything.
it.
Yeah, if you have a blade made out of diamond or something as hard as diamond, like, that's game changing, and you wouldn't be asking me how to sharpen it.
Or like a tungsten blade.
Yeah.
Can
Well, because the tungsten would just, my understanding, you've got big, strong carbides.
Right.
And so, because they're so big, they're not necessarily going to sharpen well. They're just going to kind of break and tear away.
Yeah. I've only seen them like I've never used one. They're always super
I'd be
polished.
scared of it because you
kind of scared.
You could just, it's brittle.
Right.
Yeah.
Diamond's still harder.
Diamond would be harder.
Would be harder. This was, so when I reached out to you guys, I was like, hey, I have, like, you guys are in the neighborhood. I have so many questions.
Yeah.
And you're like, all right, like, let us send you a few sharpeners, right?
Yep.
And so as I kind of went through them and played around, like, I quickly realized, like, okay, I can sharpen on any of them. Mm-hmm. But like, even just seeing you guys use that, it's a game changer. Like, understanding like the grit and like where probably that I was going wrong with it, right? Because I was removing material and I was like, this is terrifying.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
It's like going 100 miles an hour. I'm like, what's going on? This was the one that I leaned into like right away because I think it feels like that like classic process, right? And like, I actually really enjoy sharpening my knives. And this is like this, or just a round diamond is kind of what I've been going into. So you think for folders, like unguided, this is pretty solid.
Yep.
Oh yeah.
Yep. It does. So it has these ramps, the angle guide on the end at 20 degrees, which if you're, a pocket knife, give or take 20 degrees is going to be great.
Right.
If you want to be picky about the angle, if the manufacturer who made your knife is going to tell you specifically what the angle was,
right,
then great, follow that. But most knives sharpened in the factory are sharpened on a belt at the end of the day, and
by a human.
Yeah. So the training is like, yep, here's a 20 degree angle, or Benchmade says it's 22, Spyderco says they're like 17.
Right.
They vary a little bit. 20's right there in the middle.
Right.
Use 20 if you want to be consistent with what you do. If you don't, or if you want to follow the manufacturer, then cheat it up, cheat it down a little bit, and get good at that.
The difference between like 17 and 20 and 20 to 22, like when you're freehand, you can get that distance and variable. Just like on the front end when we were talking about trying to like keep a consistent angle when it came to the rod, you can get that too. So 20 gets you kind of in that happy medium space to where, as you go through, if you do have some variation, especially if you're learning in your stroke, you're still in the ballpark to get to a sharp knife.
Well, it's like, I mean, looking at sharpness in general, there's like a theoretical point that you can take a knife to that I don't actually know if it serves a purpose at that point. Like, there's always a purpose, like, and it's just cool. Yeah, it's very cool. But like, people ask me like, what? I'm like, does it cut what you want to cut?
Yeah.
Like that, I think really is what a lot of it comes down to, right? So that's actually a question that I've got for you guys. With like the hand sharpeners, do you focus on being able to sharpen to like a different grit for different work?
Yeah.
Like, do you want a polished edge versus like a really toothy edge? Like,
yes.
Do you do that on this?
You can. I'll jump on that one.
Right.
Like, so you could jump from this coarse stone to your ceramic and then leave yourself with like a toothy edge to what you come away with.
Right.
If you
so
want
ceramic is just like your hone.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So you could jump from the coarse and get yourself a real toothy edge on your bevel, and then jump over to the ceramic, and you'd have like this really good for cutting rope and that sort of thing. And then just hone it after that. You could, if you want to go for more refinement, then walk yourself all the way through all those grip progressions, which is the same for if you're using the precision adjust, or you're using like when we sharpen at shows, we jump from a coarser belt all the way down to that 6,000 grit micro mesh, and that's actually pretty close to what factory would probably put on.
Right.
Is just 2 belt jumps, and then you're out the door type of thing.
Right.
So, anything you'd add there, Josh?
No, I mean, almost everything that I sharpen, I don't want a mirror polish on.
Right.
Like, I was trying to think of, but like now, even a kitchen knife, I want a little bit of teeth on there.
That's what I've always liked.
I want a little bit of teeth on there. and there's just no sense in going too far. So yeah, similarly, you can jump, or man, this is like a theory world, but I've moved from like, I'll get it all the way sharp and then I'll make like 2 light passes on the diamond again and just like cut some teeth back into it. And I don't know, like I'm not seeing anyone else do that. It's kind of like me making this up, but
it's like a micro serration.
Yeah, I got plenty of sharpeners and plenty of knives that I can mess with and see like, do I kind of like this? And I think it kind of does what I want, but
that's kind of the beauty of sharpening in general, though, is it's like an iterative process. Each knife is going to be a little bit different. You have to be fully present when you're doing it. We were talking about this earlier, like the idea of like just being mindful as you're like here working on something, doing maintenance. Like it's really pretty nice. Like it's a nice process, but it also, you can tailor your tool to the job that you have at hand. Will you go to like shaving sharp off of something like this?
I can, yeah. I mean, it's all in the grit progression that you get, and so because you can finish on a leather strop, it's a 0.5 micron compound on there. You can get a knife shaving sharp. Yeah. And it's about consistency,
patience.
Yeah, patience. Don't overdo it, and don't overdo it on the course. You know, you need to establish the edge. Right. And then most of your time is ceramic and leather at the end. And I
mean, same concept as the powered sharpeners, where you have material removal on the coarse side, refinement through the rest of the grit progressions. I think that too, like where I think a lot of people let their knives go way too far. And so then they have to do actual repair work. And repairing something is harder than maintaining something.
Absolutely. Yeah, as the knife dulls, you know, that edge is going to roll from one side to another, or maybe you get a little bit of a flat spot, but it's minor. You know, as soon as you start to roll, or maybe that roll breaks off, then you've got a flat spot, and then when you're trying to cut, you use more force, and you're just pounding it farther and farther. So it's a quick deterioration after you kind of lose that initial sharpness.
Yeah, and then you really have to figure out like what steps to take to get it back, like all of that repair.
So handheld, this is awesome. It's great for folding knives. If you have a larger knife, then something that has a larger abrasive is going to be helpful. And, you know, much larger than this, or much, you know, larger knives than might fit on here, you can still sharpen in sections, but for the most part, average knives is fine. You know, like even up to a 10-inch chef knife, you can sharpen past that.
Do you, motion-wise on something like this, I see people do it so many different ways. Like, I guess I've always done like the kind of the slice. It's like... But I don't feel like it actually is doing that much. And then I'll see people do like the scrub, where they're actually working in like small sections.
I see that on whetstones more.
Yeah, whetstone, always whetstones.
Diamonds. Yeah. So
so does it not transfer to a diamond stone?
I think it doesn't. I think it doesn't matter.
Okay, fair.
We have a handful of guys here. Imagine that, who know how to sharpen a knife, and we built a whetstone a few years ago, and got really into like, okay, let's all figure out how to make sure we're masters at sharpening on a whetstone. And there was a way that we all learned. We sent a guy to Asia. He comes back and he's like, all right, I've done a lot of work. I asked a lot of questions, and here's how. And Steve teaches us how to sharpen a whetstone. Over, even 6 months after that, and the way he taught us has changed. All of us have like done what feels good to us, and it changed. And so, like on a whetstone, I'm gonna have much more of like this approach, which is totally not what he taught us. He taught us much more of the like, either bringing it back or not, and just one at a time. But even on a ceramic, like I don't work it this way like I do on a whetstone. On the whetstone, I very much am here and here.
Okay.
For whatever reason, that's what's really comfortable. But as soon as I get on ceramic, I'm probably gonna hold it perpendicular to me.
Oh, that's super interesting.
Which is, I mean, you saw what I did here. Like, it's the same thing. It's almost perpendicular to me. And I'm running this method. And so I'm going to come in and I'll probably do something similar.
I think at the end of the day, because I am so very like, do it by the book. So I'm like way and toward and like doing exactly like the instruction manual taught me how to do it. But I think the same thing applies no matter what. just find a way that you're consistent and can repeat that. Because at the end of the day, all you're doing is removing material. You want it to be a consistent material removal.
Right.
Whether you're going forward or backwards. That's what we run into with this precision adjust, is because you can saw with it, you can sweep with it, you can push. And we've gotten into all kinds of debate over which direction you should try to sharpen a knife with. And at the end of the day, it's just, do you get the sharpness that you want when you're done? Sure, when it gets down to like anything else, whenever you're removing material and getting into finer grits, if you care about a polished edge, then you have to start strategizing about like, how long do I want to spend on 600 to make sure I get rid of all those pits and valleys that I've got in my edge. And so you work your way through slower. Just depends on what your end goal is. If you don't care about the blade finish, then yeah, get yourself a sharp knife, no matter which tool you're using to get there, which direction. Just be consistent in that material removal takeoff. Yeah,
this one I saw like specifically for myself. That is a great place to be if a knife comes in for maintenance, because I don't want to take it back to my grinder. Although I will say that little guy, I feel like much more comfortable now. That without thumb studs or something that would get in the way, I think that's a really good option. But this is where my head was at originally, because it's like, knife's going to come back in. I don't want to risk any kind of damage to it, and I want to essentially make like a factory new edge. Right. So this seems like a perfect
mostly
kind of
folders, you know, 3.5 inch blade.
Yeah.
I think that the beauty behind that is that as a user, you can come in with very little experience sharpening, almost like basically none. And unless you're misusing it, you're not going to damage your knife, and you're going to end up with a sharp knife. And so you can do some preferential stuff, like you can pick a different angle than the knife has.
If you think like, oh, the edge on this is thick, I want to make it a little bit more of a fine edge, you can change the angle, and you actually have like something to work towards. That's, you have accountability essentially.
Most of the knives that come back to you for sharpening, are they well worn and dull, or are they like, you know, the guy doesn't know how to sharpen it, but he's like, I think it barely tipped over.
Usually it's just they've used it, they're nervous about damaging it, and that's the thing with a lot of like even the mid-tech, definitely into the customs, like the knives become, I mean, they're fairly special to a lot of people, and so they're hesitant to do something that is going to diminish either the value of the knife or damage something that they really enjoy. So I think like this, where you have a teachable process,
slow, approachable. I can get in here, I can see like where everything's going to touch. It's like, are the scales out of the way? Is the thumb stud out of the way? Like,
you can change the angle a little bit if it is,
adjust it whatever you want, and it's really like training wheels for sharpening. Everything's kind of held in to where I know as I go through that I'm not going to screw anything up. Really, it's kind of what it comes down to.
So if you're using that, like, how much pressure are you putting on?
Hardly any. And I
like what you just did.
Yeah, like I let the weight of the abrasive. I might give it a little bit of pressure, but I'm not pushing hard on this. I'm just letting the weight of it just kind of fall down on it and let the abrasive do the work. Similarly, when I'm sharpening freehand, I'm just letting the weight of the knife with a little bit of pressure behind it, like almost like you were talking about earlier, where you're like slicing. Almost like think of the same thing, like slicing with this, where I'm just trying to take off like a tiny layer and just take my time with it.
And always pulling away from the edge. That's the thing, right?
This is just like the whetstone talk all over again. I prefer this pulling away myself. Josh, I think you push, don't you? Like you like to push into the edge, and then some people just sit here and saw.
I think if I was going to repair an edge that was damaged, or if I was going to change the profile, I think I would go into that
you have to
back and forth.
It saves so much time. If you think about like the time the abrasive's on the knife, you like slide once, pick it up, slide again.
Okay. Yeah, and it's all clear through there. This is, so I think like ultimately this answers like a big question of mine, which is like, where do I direct like our customers? So like for me, I think that works on probably 90% of everything I've ever made. Especially folders. So I guess you have some length. Well, you can work in sections though too, right?
You can work in sections. I would say the limitations, it'll fit something like this. You know, it'll fit up to, I think you can do an 8-inch chef knife. This is probably, a comfortable limit. 7-inch blade.
7-inch,
But any sort of folder. Another limitation would be if it's like a pen knife, something like comes on a Swiss Army knife or something real small like that. Real small. When it sits inside of this clamp, the blade doesn't stick out enough, and so the abrasive will actually clip the edge of that clamp before it hits the edge of the blade. So that's something that just to be aware of, accurate expectations. The knife flips over nicely, and if you get like a knife like this won't flip over
right, but it just pulls out.
But you can pull it out, move to the edge of the table, whatever you're
comfortable
with. Or just like general, if you're gonna give me like a quick and dirty version of a grit progression on this, like an averagely dull knife, like where do I go?
I probably would start at like at the 600.
Yep.
We sell this with 2 kits. So you can buy the base model Precision Adjust, which has 3 grits only. It has a 320, a 600, and a fine ceramic, which is similar to 320, 600 fine ceramic.
Right. This one is here.
It doesn't have the leather, but that's a great grip progression for a dull knife. And I would say don't linger on the 320 too long.
Right. That's material removal.
Yep. Like you get your burr, you can see you've got to the edge.
You can feel it as you're going across our cloth. Yeah. Like, I'm removing material right now. Like
if you have we have the Elite version. Price bumps up a little bit. A lot of cost is in. We're giving you a lot of diamond on that, so I think it's $120 for that. But it comes with the same like 320, 600, or 320, 400 to 600, 800 ceramic.
Oh wow! So you can get that like if you want, you can go up to like a full.
It's
mirror,
almost mirror.
Yeah.
You spend enough time at the ceramic level, and I think you can call it a mirror polish.
And that's the whole thing I was talking about earlier. Like if I spend enough time, like if I get lighter and lighter as I go, if I'm trying to get to that mirror polish. Yeah. Because I don't want to create any deep pits that I gotta try to remove. So it's almost like, I don't know, if you polish much, but like you work your way through, and as you get lighter and lighter on that polish, it should be like a mirror when you're done. Right. It's kind of the same approach when it comes to the edge of your knife. You're just kind of making sure you don't have any deep pits, and then just spend a lot of time on the 800. The 800, Josh has mentioned this before, like it leaves a nice satin finish to it almost, like that he loves. Like
I would go 800 and then either like hit it once with ceramic to make sure there's no burr, or hit it just a couple times with the leather.
Right.
But I would, you don't usually need to start with the 600, 800 is a great place to start.
Well, you can always go to a more aggressive grit.
Yeah,
but if you start there and it works, like you're better off starting there and letting it work.
Yep. Or, I start on the ceramic. I mark it with the Sharpie. This is a great one to mark with the Sharpie because you can keep a consistent angle. So you mark the edge with the Sharpie, you make a couple passes with ceramic, and you understand, okay, I need to adjust my angle steeper or shallower, and understand exactly, am I on the edge, am I matching the angle? Once if you match the angle, it should be a very quick sharpening process. Right. You're not removing a whole lot of material.
You're not fighting against trying to reprofile it or anything like that. You're just
and that's like with the muscle memory of a hand sharpening. That can be like really tricky, right? Because you just our physiology of like the way that your hand aligns to a stone. If you have like a really steep bevel, it might be hard to actually maintain that. Yeah, that's prime.
Yep. Yeah, that does a great job.
Can you break down on this guy?
This is the Ken Onion edition with the blade grinding attachment on it. So the Ken Onion edition itself has a similar triangle cassette to the one you saw earlier. And this is an attachment. The angle is set between these two pulleys. So you can adjust that anywhere between 10 and 35 degrees.
Got it.
For the sake of, we've been sharpening everything else at about 20 or describing it that way, and so I can set that at 20 using 2 hands. And then that's this angle here, and the belt on here right now is just a cotton cloth belt with a strapping compound on there.
Even like for me, even setting this thing up as a strop only would be super valuable.
Yeah,
it's just another just a power strap. Like that's great.
Yep. So power's on the trigger, belt tracking, and you can lock it out.
Variable speed.
Yep.
What does it look like going slow?
That's as slow as it gets.
That's pretty great. Yeah, see, that's super maintainable. You're not gonna with a fine grit belt.
Yep.
It's gonna allow you to learn even a little bit moving through without damaging something.
Yep. Yeah, it comes with, it comes with 5 belts. So it comes with everything from super coarse, the 120, to, your X65, X22, X4, and then a 12,000 grit, which is just like, ribbon.
Oh, wow.
Which is technically, I think, still more coarse than the compound, but, it's
and then these are structured abrasives, right?
Yep.
That's like is it aluminum oxide structured?
Probably.
Yeah. Looks like a Norax.
It is.
Okay, Norax.
Yeah,
So aluminum oxide. Yep.
Yep. I was gonna say, I know it's a something oxide.
Right.
But
Those are, so I use those belts for like blade grinding for refinement. So they don't remove a ton of material, but they provide a little cushion.
You're working these whole faces.
Yep.
Yep. When you sharpen on here, any grit, it looks the same. We'll just use the stropping belt, but here's a training wheel's 0-degree reference.
Okay.
And then when you're sharpening, you're holding the knife up here on the belt. So
interesting.
I want it up a little bit more than that. So I'm resting here, and then I'm sharpening by.
And the belt is moving away from you.
Yep, going this way.
Super interesting.
Right now with that cloth belt, he's not really all he's doing is polishing.
Right.
He's not really moving any material right now.
Yep. But you can start as coarse as you want.
Right.
Like you just were asking, a medium worn belt is going to be like this X65 or X22. These are both used slightly. Yeah, and then you can decide, do you want to use all 5 in a progression, all 6 with the strop, or do you want to, skip a few and leave a toothy edge?
Same question. Like, where's your like easy progression?
Yep.
Standard maintenance. Where do I go?
Yeah, it's between these two like gray ones, the X65 and the X22, which is a 65 micron size particle and a 22 micron. Most of the time, most guys I know, when they hand a knife, and this is like at shows, they hand me a knife, like, oh, it does need to be sharpened, and but they're carrying it. It's in their pocket. And it does, so if it needs to be sharpened, they're usually fairly abused.
Right.
And I'll start on either the most coarse or an X65. X65 is usually great, especially if you know the angle your knife's at. X65 is awesome.
Do you ever get nervous? That sharpening at a show on a knife that someone just handed me? I think I would have a hard time with it.
Yeah, it's happened enough that I don't usually get nervous. No, we were just at Blade Show. This is such a weird one to be nervous about, but at Blade Show, Raven,
Sam.
Jack, Sam.
Sam.
And he brought a buddy over who just bought a Kalashnikov and dropped it on the cement, broke the tip off. So it's not an expensive knife, but it's a nice knife. It's his knife. He just bought it.
One of those limited runs,
Sure.
one of the Desert Warrior or whatever.
Yeah, it was limited. So anyway, and he's like, oh, can you fix the tip? And the knife was brand new, and it has coating on the blade, and there's no room to mess that up. I gotta find what the angle is on the knife, and then grind a bunch of that tip to repair that tip. And so I was definitely, and they're just staring at me watching. He's making content, and so I'm the whole time,
no pressure.
Don't mess this one up. This has a thumb stud that sticks out pretty far, and so and it's over the point of the blade. So I want to be careful of that as I'm coming in here.
Right.
And maybe that means I sharpen this one at 22 or 25 degrees, and I that would drop this pulley down and get that belt out of my way.
Or you can get funky too and start
100%.
Start at a big angle coming across so that you're not hitting anything. That's the feel side.
Yeah, you got to do that with a Leatherman anyway, because they have that that big chunky handle that's you can't get in there. Or on this side, that's a drawback to this sharpener.
That's something that with the KTS when we were talking earlier too about being able to get in there. I was thinking to myself you can still sharpen those big thumb studs. You just have to again, it's just instead of being horizontal, now you're vertical.
Yeah, you come
in,
in,
coming in and working your way around.
Just getting the feel.
But this just feels more approachable, I think, when it comes to being able to see look down at what you're doing. It is a little tougher when it's in a guide and you're but it can be done.
Right.
Yeah.
This is the most relatable to the way that I actually sharpen a knife now.
Yeah.
And I don't know if this is true of most knife makers or not, but I just over the years, the last years, have not spent a ton of time hand sharpening knives. And it's a skill set that I realize I would like to develop it more. It's just a good it's a good process.
When you say hand sharpening knives, what are you
hand or like manually sharpening on a stone? Because I'm going up to my grinder. I just finished a knife. The edge is 15 thousandths thick.
Yep.
I'm putting an initial bevel on that.
Yep.
And refining it into like the finished edge.
Yep.
Right. But it's material removal.
You have like 4 grinders set up, or do you change the belt each time?
On that sharpening, I basically do. I've gone back and forth over the years, but depends on the knife. Like a 400 grit belt to start. So I have 15 thousandths of edge, 400 grit belt. I'll cut my bevels. It'll have a big feather, big wire edge.
Yep.
From there, I've actually experimented quite a bit. So I've got like a leather strop belt, which I think actually like it helps to create like a little bit of that convex edge.
Yeah, it's soft. It has
soft,
padding.
minor, right? With rouge.
Yeah.
Or I have like a big leather wheel. I've used paper wheels. They all kind of work. There's feel differences between them. I haven't been able to figure out if one is like far superior than the other.
Yeah.
It's a deep hole. Like you can keep going and going and going into the nth.
And we haven't even started talking about knife steels either,
right?
Like, and how that affects
everything.
How long the edge
an
holds
application, like what is the angle? What's the edge thickness? Are you going to be like, is it a camp knife that you're chopping with?
Right.
Is it a straight razor? Like very different process.
Yep.
Yeah, sharpening to this day is one. There's like if I categorize jobs by difficulty, there's certain things like a lot of times I'm having a conversation. Like I can grind a blade, have a conversation on a headset, no problem. When I'm sharpening, I don't do it. So sharpening requires like full focused presence because the stakes are so high.
Yeah.
It's the last thing I do
Yep.
to finish a knife.
Do you have I got a couple of questions. Do you take a finished knife to the grinder, or is it the blade?
So I've played around with this a lot. Lately, I've actually I saran the handle.
Yeah.
But I like to sharpen it in the handle.
Yeah.
I've tried it with clamps and like other work holding, and that I have this weird thought that I'm like, you're gonna cut with the knife in your hand. I just feel like there's something that's added by me doing it in the handle.
Yeah.
Sure.
Totally weird, probably inaccurate, but it's just like a feel thing where I'm like, I kind of like it better. But it does increase the risk of like catastrophic failure.
Yes.
If I bump a finished handle on the grinder, like I'm done.
How often does that happen?
I've never done it.
Yeah.
So
maybe that's what adds to the fear. It's like what would actually
all this work and this is the last thing I'm doing. Like
10, 20 hours of work.
Depends on the knife.
Yeah.
But probably in there. Like 10 on the short end, 20 on the reasonable end.
Yeah.
And that I think we touched on this a little bit earlier, which is this idea of like a lot of sharpening comes from like disciplines with knives where you are actively using the knife for a job, right?
Yep.
So it's a skinning knife. It's something that is getting dull through use, or it's something you're using on the ranch. Not all knife customers, collectors are using their knives in that way. Right. So I feel like there's this knowledge gap. So like my goal is like I want everybody that's like doing EDC and like pocketing a folder.
Yeah.
I just want them doing that maintenance because it's part of the process and like the joy of having a knife. Yeah. I think. Yeah. It's just a cool skill to have.
Yeah. Just like working on your own truck. If you're gonna be off-roading, or if you're gonna be riding a motorcycle, mechanics is an easy way to get into that, or automotive is an easy way to
a lot of it's necessity, right?
Yep.
Yeah.
When there's a pride that comes with putting an edge on your knife too, that I think until you've done it, you don't really understand like, using it and putting an edge on it that's like, man, that's really sharp. Or Josh with it, like whether it's the story you're telling yourself in your head or not, like, oh, I did that like little thing that I did with the 2 passes across the rough, and man, it feels like I'm really cutting this rope better, but like just you have more connection with your knife
I think
when you're able to do stuff like that than if you're just like using it and then it gets dull and you're like, well.
And this is a crazy thought, right? Which is knives are consumables.
Yeah.
We don't like to hear that because like if you're carrying a custom knife or like have a very nice production knife, you would like to probably have that forever. But like brutally, like it is a tool that gets consumed with use. So I actually think like maintenance sharpening extends that lifespan.
100%.
right?
Yep.
Because maintenance removes less material than repair.
Yeah, especially like a strop is not removing hardly anything. It's just straightening that edge that's there. It's taking out any minor imperfections, but you could strop a knife for days on end and you're not ever going to measure a difference.
Right. That's why I love the ceramic rod. There's like friends, families, like family. There's so many kitchens that all they have is a steel, and they refer to it as a sharpener.
Yeah,
it's not a sharpener, right?
All the time.
But you can swap that out.
Yep.
And like they're already using the steel, but now their knives actually get sharp.
Yep.
Like.
Yep. Yeah, that steel depends on the quality of the steel. Depends on a lot of factors, but those steels get thrown around in kitchens.
Yeah.
And they sit in a knife drawer or knife block for 20 years, and like that's not a consistent smooth surface. Like one day you end up running your knife across that and you cause more damage to it than you are doing good for it. And a dull knife on a steel is not gonna end up
just gets shiny.
Yeah.
Slightly shinier.
Yep. But you're not even touching an edge.
What is this guy over here?
This is the Ken Onion collaboration that is the angle set.
Okay.
This is really the traditional like rods that I know my grandpa has a set at the cabin, and you set up rods in a cutting board. Usually they were beat out the other way.
Right.
And so our innovation on it was to anchor them at the top, which allows for us to choose different angles that can be set.
Cool.
So these magnet in the bottom, and if you have them on the most narrow, that's a 15-degree angle per side. If you have them one moved, that's 17. Two moved is 20. Over here is 22 and a half, and then over here is 25. So they move in each leg moves it in 2.5-degree increments. Again back to 20 right in the middle, and then a coarse diamond, a fine diamond, and a ceramic on both sides. So one piece
and you're
of
just
feedback,
coming down straight.
Yeah,
so,
one feedback or piece of feedback we hear is like, hey, I wish these like locked in because they move. And that's actually part of the beauty of it is they don't need to lock in, so that you can then bring your knife to it and say, okay, where do I?
Right.
Like that's where I want to hold my wrist is right there. And if I'm gonna, instead of like coming over here, if I just, okay, that's where I want to hold my wrist over here. And now I can just.
Oh, that's super thoughtful.
So that was something
intentional.
That Ken actually was like, yeah, I like it like this because I'm not going to stand at it perfectly vertical or perfectly perpendicular, and then I'm not going to do this and then like move shift my whole body, take a step over. Like I want to be able to camp these in a little bit. And
I think that carries through like all of Ken's like design philosophy. Like I've known him for many years, and there's always that little bit of like extra thought process that goes into a design or a function. It's pretty cool. He's got a good brain.
He has a great brain. The collaborations that we do with him are not just a labeling thing.
Yeah.
We're not just slapping his brand on there and calling it a collaboration. He's been very intentional about
getting his hands on.
Yeah, he would. I don't like knowing him. He would never let that happen.
Right.
Like the last.
Right. So it's very fun to have
cool.
him involved in that way. This is just for like serrations. A ceramic rod that's tapered so you can get inside of some of those serrations, touch them up.
This is just another example of like, where can you be consistent? Does this feel awkward going this way? How about vertical? I mean, our brains kind of think like, I know I can hold something straight up and down, and that allows you to just kind of keep that straight up.
Well, and this is great middle ground too. Like this is a great like toolbox or like camp box sharpener because maybe you're not taking this thing out with you, and you want a little more control. This is super simple and it's protected, which I really like.
Yeah, there's fewer parts. It's really straightforward. Stows, the little details that make a difference. Stows if you put it the right way.
Just need a little more practice.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's cool. All right. I mean, honestly, that's a huge kind of amount of information just for me as far as like what and why and where. And like, I realize it's ridiculous that I just called you guys and was like, hey, can I come down? Like you guys have a ton of good content and like videos explaining all of this stuff, but I wanted a reason to visit.
Yeah.
So
hey, it's always good
I
to
appreciate it.
good to have a reason to visit. Good to have you down here.
Man, all right. I got to practice more. That's
Yeah,
exciting.
there's so many ways to sharpen.
All right, guys, that's going to do it for this video. Thanks to Lucas for coming on with us. This is the first in a series of videos we're going to be doing. So stay tuned for more headed your way.